Hi, I'm Natalie,
I'm Candace.
And I'm Danny.
and we are following Soulspiration.
In today's episode, we talk about the importance of feeling all our feelings. We have a tendency to push away what we perceive to be negative feelings. But in fact, if we would actually allow all our feelings to come up, be felt, and be healed, we would be better off in the long run. We also touch on emotional triggers and how to notice when we're being triggered and even what to do about it. We really hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks for listening.
Hi, ladies. How's everybody doing today?
Very
Doing
well.
Good. How are
I'm
you?
so happy to see you.
I know.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Doing good. Doing well. Doing good. You ever do those little grammar things in your head where you say one thing and you're like,
yourself.
oh yeah, it's actually, yeah. Because doing well sounds better, but it's actually doing good is proper. Anyway. For all the grammar
Really?
nerds out there, yes.
Good is proper?
Yes.
Are you
I
sure?
know. Yes.
What did I say? Did I say well?
No, I don't know. But
I think I said well. Now you're gonna have me questioning everything.
We'll have to Google it after, but I believe so, yes. So, since we're not talking about grammar today on the podcast, but you know me, I try to get us to go down as many rabbit trails as possible. But what we are going to talk about today, ladies, what I really want to talk about today is feelings and feeling all our feelings and not maybe just looking through how we're feeling and what we're feeling through a little bit different lens that lets us be a little more accepting and a little less judgmental of kind of, in air quotes, bad feelings and good feelings and all that, and lets us see more of the value in all of them and in having this full spectrum. And then in a little more detail, like what happens when we don't feel things, or when things get kind of stuck, or when we get triggered, some of those other things that can happen when we do hold on to feelings and get them trapped in our body. And then, other things happen what happens when we don't allow ourselves to just feel whatever's coming up in the moment, and how that can kind of affect us, and kind of what we can do about it, and deal with it in more of a healthy, kind of productive way, so we don't have to be quite so miserable and take it down the rabbit hole. Because you know how that goes. It's like with feelings is we get into a cycle, and then we start to build momentum, and then our brain goes on, and then we build more and more, and then before you know it, it's really full blown. When if we had been more willing to kind of let it flow through and feel it when it was smaller, it might have just taken a different turn. And so sound good to everybody?
Sounds wonderful.
Okay, awesome. So for my personal history a little bit.
Wait. Before
Yes.
you start,
yes,
Natalie has not done her card.
Natalie has a card pull. Thank you so much, Candace. Thank you. Yes, Natalie, please share.
Well, it's good to share it because it's so relevant to what we're talking about today. So
Of
today's card is Inner Guidance System. And it says, my best answers all come from the calm, radiant space within me, my inner guidance system. The more I live according to this inner compass, the less concerned I am about what others think, and the more at peace I am with my choices. I get better at following my inner guidance, and my choices improve over time. I'm excited to know that there is a reliable guidance system within me, my own feelings and intuition, and I rely on it every day. Both positive and negative feelings are information from my inner guidance system, helping to steer me in the right direction. Through these guided choices, I am powerfully shaping my own destiny and expressing my purpose and individuality. I am grateful for my loving and wise inner guidance system.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know how week after week it can just be the exact topic / message.
I know, I got it. I was like, oh my gosh, how perfect.
Back when I was like a muggle and not understanding a lot of the energetic things, right? I would, sorry, you know, the kids were very into Harry Potter, and that's just like the thing. But I really think about, and as I go through, from more of kind of a practical, logical kind of life coach hat and personality and everything, into more of the spiritual and more of the understanding of just different energies and things we can't see but that are true, it helps me in my mind not to separate people like muggles and magical people, but really to understand that people are just seeing things differently, and that to try to understand a magical concept to someone who, you know, is very attached to cerebral, using their intellect, relying on their intellect alone, or primarily, and only interested in those things they can see and feel and touch, maybe not feel, but see and touch. It just it's a big, you know, kind of way that helps me understand, like, if someone doesn't like understand or is maybe judging me or something else, it's like, oh, they're, you know, they're just in that different realm, and it just doesn't make sense. But anyway, there I go again, trying to take us off course. I love that card, but when in my Muggle days, I would have looked at that and thought, okay, so our topic for today is feeling the feelings, and someone went through a deck of cards and tried to find something that said, feeling all your feelings is great, you know? And it just, it does amaze me. And you just can't, there's so many things where you just can't say, oh, it's all chance, or, oh, it's all, there's nothing bigger at work there. It's just luck or coincidence or whatever. It just cracks me up. But I love your card every time, and it almost just like breezed over. I just can't believe that. It's so amazing. And it's so true that inner guidance is so there. And so we'll tie that together with feelings, because if we aren't validating our own feelings, then we don't get to that inner guidance, because we're always just kind of shutting down. No, I don't have a right to feel that way. So if I don't have a right to feel the anger or the sadness or whatever, then the joy, it's the same way. The joy gets shut down too. Like when you damper some, you damper it all. So like, I know when I grew up, and maybe we can even just talk about a little bit about how it was when we were growing up, without sharing anything you don't want to share, just about expressing feelings, or even, you know, we all have children. So even teaching them about expressing feelings, like my kids know, like they will even kind of mock and tell me, you know, I know whatever I'm feeling is okay. Like, they've heard me say it so many times, like, whatever you're feeling, you have a right to feel, even if it's anger at your mother, even if it's, you know, whatever, even if it's politically incorrect, even if it's like whatever it is, you have a right to feel it. Now we can talk about how it's okay to express in different situations and stuff, and everything, but they know, it's ingrained in them. They have a right to feel everything that they're feeling. And I think for me, because it wasn't, but you know, we're growing up in an interesting time. I mean, our parents and their parents, they were like in survival. They were like, they're about survival. They're about like living this life and getting through it and doing the best they can. And, you know, they didn't have all the self-help and psychology and understanding and growing in everything that's really taken over and that we have available to us. And so with that, I just, at a very early age, I was probably kind of empathic, but I really turned it off and turned inside and really decided that my role was to make it okay for everybody else. So what that did to my feelings was, I don't have a right to feel any of them. None of them count, because what's really important is, what do I need to feel, or what do I need to do to make that person feel okay, or to keep the boat kind of even. And so I grew up with that. And then I married someone who kept that environment the same, where I needed to make sure that he felt okay. And my job was to make sure that I was whatever he needed to, I felt like, make him okay, right? So then it takes you to a certain point, and then you're like, okay, I can't do this anymore. So then it's like, you know, therapy, counseling, self-help, the trail, you know, starts. But the pain has to get so bad that you're just like, okay, you know, what, you know, the explosion or whatever. But there is a book that really helped me, because since I spent my whole childhood, 20s, and a lot of my 30s invalidating my feelings and not being in touch with my feelings at all, and being one of those like walking around intellects, because I had a lot of low self-esteem and stuff growing up, but I always thought, well, I'm smart, I can get good grades. So I did rely very heavily on my intellect. And I would just think my way through things and not feel my way through things at all. And when we are going to intuition, tying back to the card, it's the feelings that guide you. It's not your brain that will take you to where guidance and your inner guidance, divine guidance life is trying to take you. It's not your brain that's going to take you there. It's your intuition and your feelings. So I wanted to begin to explore. I didn't even have a language for it. I didn't even understand how to really feel my feelings. And one of the books that really helped me is by Panache Desai, Discovering Your Soul Signature. So he just takes you through, like, for anybody who really just feels like, I don't know, I'm kind of numb, I'm not sure what I'm feeling a lot of the time, or someone asks you an opinion about that and you're just like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I have much of an opinion, whatever. So it just kind of takes you through, and like it starts with like fear and sadness, and like has this homework where you actually feel it and you pull it up in your body and stuff. And it's like, oh my gosh. And then he talks about each one and how beneficial and how useful it can be. And it really opened my eyes. And so now I have really blathered on. So I want to hear from you guys about, your experiences early on of being okay to feel your feelings, and maybe with your kids about, how it's okay for them to feel their feelings, or how we traditionally kind of try to box kids in a little bit and wanting them to behave, or things like that. Anything that come up.
Okay. First off, that book sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
It seems like a really cathartic kind of process to go through and actually feel each of the feelings. Because I'm sure as you're doing it, there's experiences behind getting to that place, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I'm going to check out that book. In terms of me growing up and what I was told about feelings, I mean, the main thing that comes to mind is the stop crying or I'm going to give you something to cry about.
I had that one.
And I heard that one frequently. I was a very sensitive and emotional child. I heard it often. I was also a little bit spoiled, so I may have cried a lot when I didn't get my own way. And I don't know, like, I'm sitting here trying to piece together how that affects me now, and I might need a few more minutes to see if that still plays out in my life. I mean, obviously it was impactful because I still do it. And I swore I would never do it to my daughter. And I haven't. My daughter hears a lot because my daughter is also a sensitive and emotional child and a little bit spoiled. And so there's frequent tears. But she likes to get really dramatic with her crying, and she starts wailing at the top of her lungs. So frequently coming out of my mouth is, it's okay to cry, but you need to do it a little more quietly. I know that you're sad right now, but you can't wail. So whether that's right or wrong, that comes out of my mouth a lot. I'm not sure if in 20 years she's going to be like, yeah, you know what my mom said to me?
Yeah, that's so funny. I tell my kids all the time, yes, you'll need therapy, but you'll need less than I did. That's all I can do for you.
That's so true.
The best I can do. Yeah, so when I was growing up, I don't remember like anything specific, like being like not allowed to express my emotions, but I know that I grew up in an area of England that is like well known for like sucking it up and getting on with it, so it was kind of just inherently part of the people. So whether I inherited, I mean, you'd have to ask my mom whether I inherited that like genetical locational strength, I don't know, but I cry a lot. I'm a crybaby. And I've always been that way. So who knows as a kid, but I don't remember having to suppress them. But I know that you hear it all the time. And actually you're talking, Danny, about how the intellect is not what's going to get you, where you're going to go. It made me think about schools and how like the school's focus is, 95% on intellect and less about actually connecting people with the feelings and allowing people to feel feelings. It's about conformity. It's about,
Obedience.
Intelligence and obedience. Yeah. So that's really interesting when you think about that and the power that is in feelings and how really schools don't tend to nurture that. So like you've got the parents who are stop crying, be brave rather than fearful, that you're not allowed to be scared, you're not allowed to be weak, you're not allowed to cry, you're not allowed to feel sad, chin up, get over it. It's those kind of things which you hear and are just kind of like normal, and then you go to school and it's the same kind of aspect. So when you get into an adult life, like you're really taught to suppress all of those emotions and you don't really allow yourself to feel. So it's like it's not necessarily a conscious thing, but it's just something that's learned as you grow up, and so it becomes less important. So I thought that was really interesting. And then when you're talking about the book and how you and going and feeling sadness or whatever, and that can be somewhere in the body, like you can feel that actually somewhere in the body, and that's either because you hold that emotion in the body so it can help attune you to when you feel sad, like you'll feel it here and this is how it feels, so you can determine whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, whether it's frustration, all the different emotions that you might not be really sure like what is it that this really is. By feeling into the body you can maybe establish, but also it tells you how much you hold within, and if you don't allow that feeling to be felt, it has no escape, it cannot release, and so your body is just this compressed being with all of these pent up feelings and emotions that haven't been able to be released. And I know that you're like, I do Reiki, and that's a lot about releasing and balancing everything, and so when you do that, that's shifting stuff that is being held within, and feelings is a big part of that. And so knowing everything that I know now, doing things like Reiki and just understanding, like even when I worked with you at first, Danny, we had one of our first calls, like I was a bit upset about something that was going on, and I can remember you really just encouraging me to feel it. Like before I'd be like trying to explain it and I'd be like quashing the tears and not allowing them to come out because I've got to have this conversation and I can't be seen to be weak, and I'm like holding it all in, and then you just really encouraged me to go there, and I wailed, like just wailed on the call. But then it was amazing how doing that I felt the release. Doing that I was then able to actually have a conversation rather than like breaking my way through it, trying to get the odd word in here and there. So it made me feel so much better. So you were the one who first really truly made me think about it on kind of that level. And then and so now, like with my kids, I'm exactly the same in the sense of like I name feelings. So when they're throwing things, I'm like, it's okay to be angry. I know that you're angry. I'll acknowledge it. I'll acknowledge the feeling. So I'm not like, just stop, stop, behave, sit down, be quiet, shut up. It's more like, I understand that you're frustrated. I know that you're angry with me. I know that you're upset with me. I know that I'm upset you, and I'm sorry that I've upset you, but whatever. So I like give them the name of the feeling and I allow it. I don't make them stop feeling that. My daughter today had like a huge paddy, like one of the worst things she's ever done, but I'm just like, okay, and I just let her do it and let her feel it because she needed to. And it doesn't help to make me quieten her down and wrong for it, because she isn't wrong for it. She's 2 and she's not mature enough to handle these emotions in an adult way. And then when I even say that, like, what is the adult way? Are we then, again, suppressing it? So I don't know. Anyway, that was just my experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So we've all done our work to kind of be in that place where we know feelings is okay and we're not going to try to squash it. So once you've done that work, then you can allow it in your children. But if you haven't done it yourself, you can't allow it in your children. That's one of these things with like growth and evolution and transformation is it's the oxygen mask in the airplane. You have to do it for yourself first. Loving yourself, teaching your kids to love themselves. Like, I can't teach my daughter to love herself if every time I look in the mirror, I'm like, oh my God, I look so this or I look so that, and cut myself down. We have to give it to ourselves first. And then again, there's Danny going on a tangent, but that's worthwhile. Okay. So thank you, Natalie, for bringing us so beautifully to the point where we can talk about what happens when feelings do come up. And if we understand that feelings they come up for a reason, they come up because of who we are and our experiences and things like that. The thing that trips us up is when we try to resist, deny, push away feelings, because then a few other things can happen. If we're willing to feel the feeling, so like, for example, the next time that a big feeling comes up, and these big feelings, like we have little feelings all the time. It's traffic, or the kids irritating, or somebody left the dishes undone, or spilled something on the floor and you walk through it in your socks, or like whatever that is. Like those little things come up. But talking about like those bigger things where you're just like, you feel like you might need to cry, or you're just really frustrated, or you need to yell at somebody or something, and you have big feelings come up. Here's I'm going to give you a brief kind of walkthrough of what to do in that situation, right? And Candace and Natalie both been through this, right? We've been through this together, but I want to give the people who are listening just a brief kind of, excuse me, a brief kind of walkthrough of what to do. So what typically happens when an emotion comes in is we have some sort of numbing or pushing away or resisting that comes up. So for different people, that can look like different things. It can be some kind of avoidance tactic or numbing tactic or something like that. But if we allow ourselves to feel it, so what happens a lot of times is our brain gets going. So we have a thought, and then we have an emotion, and the emotion starts to get bigger because our brain is going, yeah, and then, and oh yeah, and then, and oh yeah, and then there was this other time, or oh yeah, and then this makes me upset, right? So our brain just gets started. Oh, she had the nerve to do that, and then did you see this? And she was all blah.
And do you remember when she did X, Y, and Z 10 years ago?
Like it was yesterday. I remember it like it was yesterday, and she never apologized either, right? Like all of it. Our brain gets going. So here's what we do. When we're on that merry-go-round and our brain is going, we flip this little switch and we close our eyes and we go into the body. And then we turn our attention not on the next thought of the next thing that she did, which was even 12 years ago, going further and further back to pull things, but we turn a switch and we turn the attention of our mind into the body, and we say, where is this located in my body? And immediately, if you haven't already, you're going to feel it, and it's going to be something. It's going to be a heaviness in the chest. It's going to feel like an iron brace around the back of your neck. It's going to feel like something, and it's going to have a feeling. It may have a texture. It may have a color. It may even have a name. But you're going to be able to feel it in the body. It could be like, oh, I'm nauseous. So what you do is, where is this in the body? And if you need to and you can't get there, you start with the toes and you just kind of scan the body. And you're like, okay, well, what's going on in my body right now? And you get to it. And now the mind has stopped from the that was going off and down that direction. And you're really focused. You're feeling that feeling. And you're really focused on where it is in the body. And then you keep your mind's attention on the sensation in the body. And one of a couple of things are going to happen. That feeling might expand at first because you're like, oh, I'm allowing myself to feel it. And spirit goes, you're allowing yourself to feel it? Okay, well, here you go. And it's a little bigger, or it gets a little bolder. And then what you'll find, it might move. Sometimes it'll be in the chest. It'll move to the throat. Sometimes it'll move. But over time, and when I say time, I'm literally talking about even a couple of minutes, it starts to dissipate. It starts to melt away. It just starts to kind of be released, like magically. But our goal isn't like, okay, I'm going to release this. Oh, I'm going to release this emotion. I'm going to go to the body and release it. No, it's just like it magically happens if you will focus on that sensation in the body. And I swear, and then you stay with it a couple of minutes, and sometimes it'll go away completely, and then you're done. Other times you get to a point after you've tried this a few times where you're like, okay, this is going to be more than just today. Like, I'm done good for today. Like, talk to it. Like, I know you're still in there. and I want you to come up and be felt, and I want you to be safe, and I'm ready to feel you. And maybe that's enough for today, and we'll come back, I promise, we'll come back. So any thoughts on kind of anything that came up for you guys during that, or if you've used it, or anything else?
For me, the first experience with that was with you also, Danny. So I think that we were like a few sessions in, and you said, let's go in and feel this in the body. And I was like, what? What do you mean? Because my entire life, nobody had ever said anything like that. I hadn't heard anything like that. Now that my awareness is open to it, I've seen it and heard it a lot more. But then you were the very first person to introduce me to it. And it was healing, but it was also really hard. To kind of, and it wasn't hard to like physically do it or mentally do it, to feel it in my body and then sit with it, but to not do anything, like to just be there with it and not be like willing it to go away or trying to force it out of my body. Like to just sit there with it was probably the hardest part. But as I did, I mean, it felt like a mountain in my chest. And as I did, and I just sat there with it, I mean, I got incredibly emotional. I was crying like a baby. And I mean, like you were saying, it was too big to release all of it in that moment. I knew that it wasn't gone. I knew that I'd be able to come back to it, but it went from being like, literally, it felt like a giant mountain that was just taking up all of my torso. And when it was done, it felt more like a rock, that I could come back to and deal with later. It was, I feel, life-changing for me. That moment, that release allowed me maybe the space within my own energy to really accept love back in again. Because I was in a very, don't you do it, Danny, you're going to make me cry.
I'm already, yeah. Yep. Too late.
I was in a really sort of angry and bitter place. There was a lot going on in my life, and there was no space to let love in. There was no space to feel the feelings and feel the good stuff. And that one exercise really opened it up to allow me to let all of that stuff in. And really, I mean, my life has drastically changed since then. Pretty much every possible way that it could have changed, it has. And I really attribute it to that first experience of really feeling my feelings and going into the body.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing if you haven't done it. And I know, I do sessions a lot, and a lot of times as soon as I'm finished with a session, I forget almost everything that happened in the session. I remember that session with you, like moment for moment. I remember the feeling of it. Like I remember everything about that session, and I almost never remember sessions. I just breathe in and breathe out and be like, I take notes, because otherwise I'm like, okay, what the hell did we talk about last week? I have no idea. But yeah, it's really powerful. And I also think that it kind of works even if you like never sat down and were like consciously like, I'm going through all these steps again. It's kind of with you, and you kind of know it and kind of use it intuitively and kind of just know that your feelings are okay, and that you can, like, it shifts things on more than just that level of, okay, this is an exercise I need to repeat every single day, and I'll do it before I get going in the morning, and then I'll do it at night, or whatever that is, that's that practice or whatever, that it really can change us just in the moment and forever, based on just a new awareness of that's possible, or that it's not going to kill me. Oh, look at that. Like it seemed really bad, and I am still here, and I feel a little bit better. Holy shit.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there was that was amazing when you did it for me. And I think it was you who told me about the feelings flowing through thing. I feel like that was you, but like now whenever I feel something and it's like my brain wants to like, one, make it worse, or two, like keep it inside for whatever reason, I just imagine it literally like knowing that if I allow this, it's just gonna come and go. Like, so the more I resist it, the longer it'll stay. That sadness is going to stay in my heart, and I don't want it there, so I'm going to let it go. So it's like, it's one of those things that I do. And another thing, like someone else I work with, I think I mentioned it on another podcast, so I won't go into it in depth, but it's based on a concept that I've also read about to do with grief, where they say that if you experience grief, that, you know, there's this there's like it's a meme or something I've seen on Facebook or a video, and it's like there's a circle and it's like this big, and people think that over time that circle shrinks, but what happens is not that. It's that circle of grief within you stays the same. It will always be there, because, you know, grief is one of those feelings that, you know, can you let it go? I don't know, that's maybe another day. But we, like, what happens is you expand. So like, as you know, move forward and release, it doesn't go away, but you expand so that it holds less of a space in you. And so that's one of a practice that I've done with a coach before, where we've worked, and it's all about, you take the breath and you breathe in, and you breathe in more and more and more, because you realize there's always a little bit more to just expand your body, to quieten the mind. And so it's not necessarily to not feel it. You totally go there. You go to the feeling place, but in doing so, by going to the feeling place, you expand your body to not allow it to consume you. And I think that's the thing with the feelings, is by bottling them in, not allowing them to be there, honoring them, you then allow them to consume you.
I love that so much. That is so beautiful. And you both mentioned space, and space is so critical, to have the space to allow the understanding, to allow the softness, to allow the acceptance, to allow the time and energy around something for it to kind of be what it is, and so that it can dissipate or become smaller or whatever. One of the things that I think they talk about, you know, more in, it's more kind of the Eastern concept or whatever, is, you know, we're very attached, you know, to our body, our ego, like all of that kind of stuff. And when there is some kind of detachment, what you realize is that when we have a problem or an issue, we can make that problem or issue feel like it's bigger than us, when in fact we are literally the space that allows all of this to come up and to be. It moves through us all the time, and if we allow it to, it can move through. But sometimes we focus on this until it gets so big it feels like it's bigger than us. But one of the phrases that I repeat sometimes when I am really overwhelmed or something like that is that, you know, I'm the space that this all comes up in. It's not bigger than me. Sometimes it can feel so big, can feel like that cavern or that void where we just step in and fall. Grief is one of those things. Grief really is, I mean, if we look at the whole scale of all grief is one thing that you can definitely fall into and feel like it is definitely bigger than you are. But you know, one of those things is, I am the space. I'm the space that all this comes up in, and just giving things and not trying to push down and resist and, oh, I need this to be different than what it is so that I can survive, kind of thing. I really like that. Did you have anything with that, Candace?
I really like that. I just wrote it down because I'm going to save that and use that. But here's what came up as you were talking, and I almost started laughing out loud. I contained myself. I kept those feelings in. But so what I just realized is, so talking about that experience for me was really emotional. And I was feeling like I was ready to cry. And then I look at you and I see you're ready to cry. And I'm like, don't you do it, Danny. And I quashed your feelings and I squashed my feelings so that we could like maintain some composure on this call. So I just realized, like, we're having this talk about letting yourself have the feelings, and I'm squashing both of our feelings. How fantastic is that? It is so ingrained.
So awesome.
And it didn't even seem like anybody noticed because it's just normal to be like, nope, we're doing something serious here. You can't cry. Like,
You're a big girl.
yeah.
Suck it up.
Yeah. I need to maintain my composure. Don't make me cry. Like, because we're talking about crying being okay.
Do as we say, not as we do.
Yeah, exactly. Clearly,
that was my dad
for me on that.
That was my dad's whole parenting strategy right there. Do as I say, not as I do. Like, no, we learn by your example. Sorry. It's impossible. But that was his whole parenting strategy right there. So yeah, thank you for that. That's self-awareness is such a beautiful thing. It's so beautiful. We do those things and then notice them. So yeah, so that's awesome. So let's talk about, when things do get trapped. Like, so we push them aside or we avoid them or we whatever. And sometimes it's so funny because we'll have a numbing or avoidance strategy and we'll be like, oh, that worked. I feel better. I've got this full of popcorn, or I'm online shopping, or whatever our thing is, right? We're like, oh, that worked. Dodge that bullet. No, because we don't realize if it comes up and we don't move through it, the only way out is through, right? Like that ancient wisdom, like the only way out is through. And Natalie, when you're talking about letting it go through you, letting it move through you, and we have to let it go. And so things that get trapped are things that we deny or push aside or numb or avoid, right? And then they can get trapped. And one way I really like, it gives me the good kind of understanding of kind of how this works, because so much of this stuff is, you can't see it. So how do you really know how it's working? But one analogy is that emotion is energy in motion. And when we deny, when we stop, when we stuff it down, when we tell ourselves, when we invalidate it and disrespect it, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I'm not going to allow myself to do this, he's not worth it. I'm not going to feel hurt and everything by him. He's gone or whatever. I'm just not going to allow myself, whatever that is, that you're just not allowing yourself to feel any of it. It gets trapped in the body. So if emotion is energy in motion, then we get it trapped. And then what we create is what we call a pain body. And I think that's Eckhart Tolle's term, but I don't know. He's, he gets his stuff from a lot of the Eastern, masters and stuff. So whatever, but that helps me. And that the pain body is the emotional stuff that's trapped. And so one of the ways that we know we have this pain body is like we were just describing, like a big, powerful emotion comes up. We go into the body and we're like, oh, holy crap, there it is. Also, we can be triggered by things, which is kind of the same thing, but it occurs in a little bit different way, right? So we all know what triggers are. Emotional triggers are when something happens. And what is happening in front of us isn't the whole story, because our mind and our emotional pain body is pulling up all the times that it's happened before or other examples, and it's bringing all the emotion of all that history and all that stuff up into the now moment. So a lot of times we recognize we're being triggered because something will happen, and on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like a 2.5 probably. Only our reaction is an 8 or a 9 or a 10, or, for some people, who tend to get overly emotional people. But if you look at it objectively, like you're like, okay, that's at 2.5.
Right.
Or like I've even done with you guys before, and I'm not going to say the specifics, but there was this one time, it was so cute. And I talk about myself as cute, like, oh my gosh, look at her having a complete fit over something so silly. So I had something and I was just like, can you, and I held it up to you guys. I'm like, can you believe how annoying this is? Like, look at this blatant, blah, 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 and drama queen and trying to get attention, and look at this nonsense. And you both had the same reaction, which was, sure, kind of. I kind of see what you're talking about, right? Like, you guys, it wasn't even.
I think we were a little bit like, I don't get it. Like, I think we were actually almost like,
what you mean first, and then when you explained it a little bit, it was like, oh, I kind of see that.
Okay, kind of. Right? Like, so funny. I may be getting triggered, right? Like, so that's when you know. It's like, can you believe this, this blasphemy or this, this uncool thing, this, blatant disregard for decency or whatever it is, And, the people are like, okay, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm missing something. Can you tell me what you're talking about? That's such a good way to know that you're being triggered. Because sometimes you're so oblivious, you don't realize, oh, it's all my own stuff. That is perfectly fine. It's just me over here reacting to, God knows what stories I made up and tied to my past. I just tied her to like every unrealized dream and like every thing in my life and made it this situation's fault. And so, but we get triggered and we get in these stories, and half the time we don't even realize it. We don't even realize it a lot of times. Now, sometimes you guys are pretty evolved and everything. A lot of times, like, we'll notice it. Oh, look, I'm getting triggered. Like, I do this, I do a good job of noticing a lot of times, but sometimes when it's really blatant, when it's really juicy stuff, I just don't see it. But I don't know. You guys have anything that you want to talk about with triggers in real life, or ever have like one of those moments? I just looked at the clock. It's 11:11. Spirit's like, we got you, girl. I'm like, okay, Spirit, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for confirmation.
No, I remember that thing now, and I'd completely forgotten about it, and I've totally got the giggles just thinking about it, because when you put it like that, it's just so funny. You're like, oh, it's all my own.
Thanks. Thanks for helping me realize that. Okay.
It's so funny, like, you put it like that, and because I know that I've been there. Like, so we had something where I completely lost it a couple of weeks ago, because Spirit gave me a message that I was just like, really not happy. Oh, and I just and I knew, and Danny was like, oh, can I tune him? I was like, I know it's me. I know I just need to come to terms with this message. I know it's all me. And it's funny because, it's just, and you can just tell by it's like the acceleration. I think a trigger is when you go from I'm doing okay to I am on the roof, losing my shit. So it's that kind of you just, if you're unsure whether you're triggered, look at the acceleration rate, and then that's probably a good barometer as to is this legit or is this just my own bullshit.
Thank you so much. I love that one. I love that. Did I just go 0 to 60 in record time? I love that so much. That really helps, and you don't have to drag your friends into it to find out.
My favorite part, though, is at the end of something like that, Daddy, you're like, well, that was cute.
Oh, yeah.
I do, because I feel like, especially as a coach and as a person who's on this transformational path, the tendency is to really get down on yourself. If you find yourself in your humanness getting triggered by someone who doesn't mean anything at all, it's nothing, you get mad at yourself. So my saying it's cute is a way to laugh at myself instead of judging myself. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it is cute, and it's totally human. We're all freaking totally human. And I've always told myself I'm not a jealous person at all, and then you realize certain things, even a thing you hate, and then you realize there's some jealousy, who wants to look at that, right? There's some of these other things that you don't want to look at, but as soon as you do, there's just so much freedom. There's so much freedom. And look at that, and that's what I want to pull from that. That's what I'm missing, that I don't feel like I have, but I but I easily could. I can cultivate a little bit of that in myself. And, oh, wouldn't it be, great to do that? And, oh, I can already feel the vibe of it. Like, so it just transforms itself. Here's the thing a lot of times is sometimes we see a trigger, and what we want, again, is like being transformational. People's like, oh, that's a trigger. And then invalidate all the feelings, like, oh, I'm not really feeling this about this. And then again, to pull ourselves back and invalidate it. Well, it's still not invalid. It's still valid. So what it means is, it doesn't mean lash out at this person or pull her up for your friends to be like, oh, and join me in this bashing session. It doesn't mean any of that. It means look at it so that you can just have a little bit of space. Like the healing from it takes care of itself when we allow ourselves to just look at it, just not to go in and say, oh, this is a trigger, so I shouldn't be feeling this way, or I don't really feel this way. Example, like I had something with my daughter, and she was triggered. And she's a very strong, independent woman. And part of the reason is because she had a very authoritarian father figure. And there's a rebellion there. There's a rebellion. So, and it's very natural. But now in her 20-year-old life as a woman out in the world, when she comes across anyone kind of authoritarian or who wants to tell her, no, do this, even though it makes no sense because I said to, a very big reaction. And she's like a lot of us is like, yeah, you tell me to do it, I'm going to do the opposite. We all have that to a certain extent, right? She's got it like full blown. So she was in a situation where this was happening, and she was very, very triggered. And I said, well, I was trying to help her talk it through it. And after I've told you guys, I told my kids have a right to feel other feelings. So anyway, I'm talking her through it. And I'm like, well, did you think about this in terms of it being a trigger for you and bringing up things from your childhood and stuff? And she's like, oh yeah, but that doesn't mean it's any less valid that I'm not going to do what this guy says. Even though I might have consequences to my grade or to my attendance at my at her study abroad program, right, for missing a day when she had the details don't matter, but there would have been a consequence for her personally by basically telling this guy, I don't think so, I'm not going to do it. And but so it was funny because in my mind I was like, oh, you see, it's a trigger, in other words, now you can conform, was kind of in my mind where I was naturally going. And she's like, yeah, I see it as a trigger and I'm still not freaking doing it. Like, which I applaud. Like, how many times do our kids teach us stuff, right? They teach us stuff all the time in their mirrors and everything, but it was just so great because just like, yeah, just because it's a trigger though doesn't mean it's invalid. It's basically what she was saying. And I'm like, damn, you're good. Like, that's really awesome. And she was still able to feel it and recognize it as a trigger at the same time. And that's like the healing of it, is like, yeah, I recognize it and I'm going to feel it and I'm feeling all these things. And there's also a gift there that doesn't mean it completely goes away, but it means we don't have to attach so much to it, or we don't have to, like, sometimes when we're triggered, we have that automatic reaction or whatever to turn away from it or act a certain way or whatever. We can feel the feelings and then act from a place of, yeah, I recognize that. And now I'm free and I have the space to act however I choose to act and not be like the pinball in the machine, just being bang, 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 hit around and at everybody else's mercy. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that makes sense.
I feel like I kind of went around the.
No, I'm just thinking about everything that you just said. And this is the first time that I'm really thinking about the fact that just because it's a trigger doesn't mean that it's invalid. Because I do think that even in that experience where there was, whether it was jealousy or whatever it was with with your girl there, not your daughter, like the experience where you came to us. I think even in that moment, it was more like, oh, I'm just being silly.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And like, that's like the go-to. And I know that I do the same thing too. It's, if I realize something, there's like, you know, a much deeper root cause that's triggering this grandiose emotion in the moment, I'm like, I don't go in and feel the feeling. I just disregard it. Oh, well, that's not applicable then, because it's just a trigger.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to have this whole new outlook when things come up of going and sitting with it and being like, yeah, I feel jealous, or yeah, I feel angry, or yeah, I feel irritated or frustrated or whatever it is. And still experiencing it, feeling it, and letting it flow through. Whereas up until now, I just pushed it away. And even trying to do like the transformational thing in, yes, it's going through that whole process, and yet still essentially holding on to it, right? Because if you don't go in and really feel it, it doesn't necessarily release. And so it's still kind of there.
Yeah, it's true.
So anyway, that's what I was just processing all of that as you were talking. So yes, it all made sense.
Good.
I think there's also like two levels. So one, it's like you don't diminish it just because you feel it. I totally agree with that. But then there's also like, if you're getting triggered, it's really an opportunity to look at it, look at why you're getting triggered. So don't just go, oh, it's a trigger. And I can see your daughter, being like that. But I like, what would be great is one day for you to live life and still make the choice not to do what that person says, if that's the choice you want to make, but to do that from a place of empowerment rather than a place of trigger. Oh, I'm triggered, I'm not doing it. And even if you know it, but like you could actually heal it so that those people don't trigger you. You don't have to get to that point. Like, look at what it's trying to tell you, look at what it's showing you about yourself, and then work on that so that then you don't have to be triggered. Like, I think the triggers are really an opportunity to show you something about yourself that you're not aware of, something that you're holding on to, and then allow yourself to release that. So it's both feeling the feeling that the trigger brings about, but then also diving into not really allowing that to happen in the future, because there's no need.
I love that. So if we look at this, brings us beautifully into the next thing, which it really is that triggers, and in fact all feelings, are like little messengers. They're messengers. They have messages for us. They have gifts for us. So that's the question really, is what is the gift here? What is coming up for me to see? And not so that I don't have to feel it, but I can feel it and then be like, okay, great. Well, this obviously wanted to come up. And it was so funny because I was doing a thing last night because, of course, I got triggered after I decided that the topic for today would be feeling feelings and being triggered. So, of course, last night I got triggered. It doesn't matter what it was about. And I was like, oh, so I was like, okay, this will be, like for the talk, like, what am I going to do? Oh my gosh, of course I got triggered. How beautiful is that? And I was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? And I'm like, oh, I'm feeling like blah, 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 just like lashing out. I'm like, okay, I'll just do a visualization. I'm just really lashing out and tearing down the situation, and just really like graphically. And then it got to the point where it was so much that it just got silly. And then I'm like giggling. I'm like, okay, the anger has been worked through, like that little cloud has been worked through. And now what else is here? Oh, I noticed this, and I noticed that. But it's like, it really does just happen naturally. And like, you're so acute, Natalie, it's not like going in like, oh, this isn't valid because it's a trigger, but what gift is here for me? What is this pulling up? And what is there missing? I feel like I'm denying myself, or is there a fear? There's usually always a fear. I feel like a lot of times, when I get triggered, it might be like political stuff and things like that. So I tend to kind of pull myself back from a lot of political stuff because I get triggered, then I get irritated, and then I'm no good to anybody. Like, if I'm walking around irritated, like, I'm really clear, like, my gift is my light. My gift is not my irritation. My gift is not my, righteousness.
or righteous indignation. Those are not, wonderful things to spread and to, elevate the planet or anything like that. Yeah, they're valid. I can feel them, but I don't need to involve anybody else in my feeling of them. So anyway, yeah. So I don't know, to kind of sum up, I kind of feel like this topic has been pretty well explored. So we feel a trigger and we allow ourselves to feel it, and we don't discount it right away. But we don't necessarily have to direct it at the thing that we think is the problem, this political discussion or the whatever that happens to be, right? It doesn't mean I have to go on Facebook and argue with that person who's so clearly wrong. I don't have to give them a piece of my mind. I don't have to set them straight. I don't have to share my righteous indignation. Like, I don't have to do that stuff to heal it. I can notice it and actually like send them love, because Lord knows they need it, like.
Of course.
Even that being so funny, like, because Lord knows they need it, clearly, if they have that idea. Because like, I know better, right? Like, we all do that. But anyway, just laughing at myself. But so yes, to not invalidate, but also not to necessarily have that initial reaction, knee-jerk reaction, but just to sit with it a little bit, like you were even saying with the strong emotion, sit with it a little bit. The trigger's the same thing, sit with it a little bit. What's the gift? What's trying to come up? Can I allow myself to feel it? And then once you feel it, then I feel like the gifts are easier to get once you work through that big initial kind of spike of emotion. Then kind of the gifts come like trickling in. So you're saying, oh, I'm afraid, like I think that can affect me, or I think that people are hurting and I need to do something, or whatever that is that triggers in your mind, like that you understand is more the root cause of what's got you so upset.
I think you said previously, it wasn't on here, so I will reshare to the best of my ability. But when things come up like that and you're trying to find the root cause, you had said, when have I felt this before? And then when was the first time that I felt this?
Yeah.
Asking yourself those questions can help you. So, here's the trigger, you feel the feelings, and then dive deeper with the questions to find that root cause.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Candace. Yeah, I love that. And I love asking those questions. And it's funny because I think sometimes people who are into like the past life stuff will actually, like, I know I had a teacher one time, which is like, the first time I felt that, which is like, so many lifetimes ago, some ancient time, because we just keep, and we've done that. Go back to the podcast on past life regression if you're interested.
Last week's episode.
Is that only last week's episode?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
wow.
God.
So, so make sure you go back and check that out. But I've even had answers like in the womb before I was born. And I saw it all, dark, and hearing mom's heartbeat, right? Like, I mean, stuff. But it's amazing if you kind of talk to it and like have a little conversation, like you are the space, and like it has gifts for you, and it has conversation can kind of help, even if it's kind of in your mind, talking to it. But yeah, that can help. And thank you so much for bringing that in, Candace. Natalie, any kind of final thoughts from you?
I don't think so. I think it was a very interesting conversation. I guess the only thing that kind of came up for me is, like, obviously we're talking here about, emotional triggers, and we're making light of it. But I suffered from, people might not know, but I suffered from PTSD a while ago, and they're like obviously significant triggers here. So I don't want anyone to be offended by the way we're talking about triggers. This is more kind of a day-to-day things, that, because trigger is such a strong word, and I think maybe it can be kind of overused, and used for things like, like we're laughing about the situation with Danny, and that's not necessarily a trigger in the real sense. So I just didn't want anyone to kind of like take offense by that side of things. And I think this is just more the day-to-day kind of triggers, and not serious triggers in PTSD.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Natalie, for bringing that in. I think, we're all just kind of sitting here, especially me, with like these blinders of just our own experience, and not with whatever everybody else in the world is going through, which is heck of a lot of shit usually. So thank you so much for bringing that in. We never want to be disrespectful to anyone. And this is just for, if it resonates with you and like this can help, then great. And if it doesn't, the last thing we would want to do would be to offend or to, make anyone feel like we're making light of anything that is a big thing. So thank you so much for bringing in that more sensitive global kind of perspective on things to help us.
Sorry to be a Debbie Downer.
No, it's not
perfect.
Debbie Downer at all.
And I think that the conversation still is really helpful, because I was kind of relaying it to as we were speaking, I was relaying it to my experience, and it's like, well, it's still really helpful from that like acceleration point of view. So like, to go from here to here, and was that reason it can maybe help you like get into the present moment and go, is this real? Like, is this something that I really need to feel right now, or is this fear or trigger? It helps you really just, I know it's a different place. So I still think it was really helpful, but I just know that we were very kind of like lighthearted and laughing about it. And so I just wanted to bring that perspective to say, we recognize that not all triggers are just a barrel of laughs and something to, make fun of.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I used to, for the word triggers specifically, I used to only attribute it to serious situations, highly traumatic situations, and being triggered by, or in maybe drug addiction. That's the only other place that I really use the word trigger. But now it's sort of become sort of like the spiritual norm where everybody's using it. And so it's kind of watered down, so it doesn't have the same impact for me. So I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah. So I'm really glad that you brought it up.
Thank you.
Yay. Okay. Love you, girls.
Love you.